Throughout the vast tapestry of human history, empires have risen and fallen like tides upon the shores of time. From the sun-baked sands of ancient Egypt to the sprawling domains of the Mongol Khans, from Rome's Mediterranean dominion to the seafaring British Empire where the sun famously never set, these civilizations, despite their cultural, geographical, and temporal differences, shared one fundamental principle that ensured their ascent and longevity. What was this golden rule that transcended time and culture to become the bedrock of imperial success? Simply put, successful empires incorporated and adapted, rather than merely conquered and destroyed. In 539 BCE, when Cyrus the Great of Persia captured Babylon, he did something revolutionary for his time. Rather than massacring the population or destroying their temples, he freed the Jewish captives, respected local customs, and even declared what some historians consider one of the first charters of human rights. The Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact discovered in 1879, documents his enlightened approach to governance. "I did not allow anyone to terrorize the land," it reads. "I kept in view the needs of the people." This Persian innovation, conquering with respect rather than just by the sword, allowed the Achaemenid Empire to govern diverse peoples across 2.1 million square miles, from the Indus Valley to northern Greece, for over 2 centuries. The empire's administrative system of satrapies permitted regional autonomy while maintaining central authority, a governance model later empires would emulate. Consider Alexander the Great, whose meteoric conquests from 334 to 323 BCE created one of history's most extensive empires. While his military genius secured victories, Alexander understood that weapons alone could not maintain an empire. In the deserts of Egypt, he was proclaimed pharaoh and son of Amun. In Persia, he adopted local dress and customs, married a Bactrian noblewoman named Roxana, and arranged the famous mass wedding at Susa where he and 91 of his officers married Persian noble women. Alexander's fusion policy, homonoia or unity of minds, aimed to blend Greek and Persian cultures. Though his early death at 32 prevented him from fully implementing this vision, the Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged from his conquests demonstrated the power of cultural synthesis, creating vibrant multicultural societies where Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian traditions intermingled and flourished. Perhaps no empire embodied this principle more thoroughly than Rome. As it expanded from a small Italian city-state to dominate the Mediterranean world between 146 BCE and 117 CE, Rome developed a sophisticated system of incorporation. Provincial governor Pliny Quintus, writing to Emperor Trajan in 112 CE, epitomized this approach: "We have conquered them, now we must make them Roman." The Romans granted citizenship strategically, extended legal protections to conquered peoples, adopted foreign gods into their pantheon, and allowed substantial local autonomy in exchange for taxes and loyalty. By 212 CE, Emperor Caracalla extended Roman citizenship to nearly all free men in the empire, a remarkable act of inclusion that bound diverse peoples to Rome's fate. Roman roads, over 250,000 miles of them, not only facilitated military movement but also fostered trade and cultural exchange. The Latin phrase "all roads lead to Rome" reflected both physical infrastructure and the cultural gravitation toward Roman ways. Yet this was not simple assimilation, it was a two-way process where Rome itself was transformed by the peoples it governed. Eastern religious cults found followers in Rome. Greek philosophy shaped Roman thought. African emperors like Septimius Severus ruled from the imperial throne. Rome became, in the words of historian Mary Beard, not so much a place as an idea, an identity that diverse peoples could adopt without abandoning their own heritage. This pattern repeated across successful empires. During the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, China reached its cultural and territorial zenith by embracing cosmopolitanism. The capital Chang'an, modern Lebanon, became the world's most populous city and a cultural crossroads where Persian merchants, Indian Buddhist monks, and Central Asian musicians mingled with Chinese scholars and officials. Emperor Tang Taizong, whose reign from 626 to 649 CE is considered a golden age, actively recruited foreign talents regardless of their origins. The imperial civil service examinations, perhaps history's first meritocratic system of governance, allowed men of humble birth to rise to the highest offices through education and ability, creating an administrative class bound by shared values rather than ethnicity. The Tang's cultural openness transformed China itself. Foreign influences became so integrated into Chinese life that later dynasties often failed to recognize their foreign origins. Tea drinking rituals, musical instruments like the pipa, certain architectural styles, and even fashion trends all had Central and Western Asian roots but became quintessentially Chinese. When empires deviated from this golden rule of incorporation, decline often followed. The late Roman Empire's crisis in the 3rd century coincided with narrowing paths to citizenship and increasing cultural rigidity. The Ming dynasties turned toward isolationism after the vibrant cosmopolitanism of the earlier Yuan and early Ming periods coincided with China's gradual technological stagnation relative to Western powers. Conversely, when the Mongols conquered China in the 13th century under Genghis Khan and his successors, they created the world's largest contiguous land empire not merely through military prowess but through remarkable adaptability. Though known for brutal conquest tactics, the Mongols were pragmatic rulers who adopted local administrative systems, promoted trade along the Silk Road, and granted significant religious freedom. "I will rule you according to your customs," promised Kublai Khan to his Chinese subjects. The resulting Yuan dynasty employed Muslim astronomers from Persia, European travelers like Marco Polo, Tibetan Buddhist advisors, and Chinese Confucian scholars in its cosmopolitan court. The Ottoman Empire, which dominated the Eastern Mediterranean from 1299 to the early 20th century, institutionalized this principle through its millet system. This arrangement granted religious communities, Orthodox Christians, Armenian Christians, Jews, and others, significant autonomy in managing their internal affairs while maintaining allegiance to the Sultan. Under Suleiman the Magnificent, who ruled from 1520 to 1566, the empire reached its zenith of power and cultural brilliance. The Ottomans incorporated Byzantine, Arab, Persian, and European influences into their architecture, cuisine, art, and governance. Istanbul became a city where minarets stood alongside church domes, where Greek firefighting technology protected Ottoman palaces, and where Jewish refugees from Spain found protection and prominence. When Julia Stevens, an English traveller, visited Istanbul in 1563, she marveled at this diversity. "In one market, I heard prayers in 5 tongues and saw goods from lands I had never imagined." The Turks have made a world in miniature. This cultural synthesis gave the Ottoman Empire remarkable resilience, allowing it to survive for over 600 years despite facing formidable external pressures. The British Empire, which by 1913 covered nearly a quarter of Earth's land surface, demonstrated both the power and the limitations of this golden rule. In India, British governance evolved from the crude exploitation of the early East India Company to the more sophisticated incorporation policies after the Crown assumed direct rule in 1858. The British established educational systems that trained Indians in Western knowledge while preserving aspects of local traditions. They built railways that united the subcontinent economically and culturally. They created legal and administrative frameworks that, while serving imperial interests, also provided platforms for Indians to articulate their own demands for representation and eventually independence. Patrick Quincy, a British civil servant in India from 1883 to 1902, observed in his memoirs, "Our success does not lie in how many Indians become Englishmen, but in how we create systems where Indians and Englishmen can work together under shared principles. Where we have failed to do this, we have faced resistance. Where we have succeeded, governance has been stable." Indeed, the most effective colonial administrators were often those who immersed themselves in local cultures, learned indigenous languages, and respected native traditions, not out of altruism, but because they recognized that imperial control required co-opting local elites and institutions rather than simply replacing them. Yet the British Empire also demonstrates how incorporation often remained superficial or selective when fundamental inequalities persisted. The empire's racial hierarchies and economic exploitation created contradictions that ultimately proved unsustainable. When imperial powers gave only the appearance of incorporation while maintaining rigid systems of exploitation, they sowed the seeds of their own decline. The incorporation principle manifested not just in governance but in technological and cultural development. Successful empires were information networks where knowledge and innovation flowed across borders. The papermaking techniques developed in Han Dynasty China, 206 BCE, 220 CE, traveled westward, reaching the Islamic world by the 8th century and Europe by the 12th century. The mathematical concept of zero, developed in India, transformed mathematics after being transmitted through the Islamic world to Europe. These knowledge transfers were possible because imperial systems facilitated the movement of people and ideas across vast distances. The Persian royal road, the Roman cursus publicus, postal service, the Mongol yam system, and the British imperial telegraph network all served as information superhighways of their eras. Successful empires were also adept at military incorporation. The Roman legions eventually included Gauls, Iberians, North Africans, and Syrians. The Ottoman Janissary Corps incorporated Christian youths from the Balkans. The British Indian Army became the world's largest volunteer force during World War II, with 2.5 million Indian soldiers serving under the Union Jack. Economic incorporation proved equally vital. The Roman denarius, the Spanish piece of 8, the British pound sterling, these imperial currencies facilitated trade across vast territories. Empires that managed to balance wealth extraction with economic development, that built infrastructure benefiting both rulers and ruled, and that allowed for some degree of prosperity among conquered peoples tended to last longer than those focused solely on extraction. The implications of this historical pattern extend far beyond academic interest. In today's interconnected world, the lessons of imperial incorporation remain strikingly relevant. Modern multinational corporations that succeed globally tend to adapt their products and management styles to local markets while maintaining core brand identities. Apple's products work the same way worldwide, but its marketing, retail experiences, and even product features are customized for different regions. This corporate incorporation strategy mirrors what successful empires practiced. In geopolitics, the European Union represents a novel experiment in voluntary incorporation, creating shared institutions and identities while preserving national sovereignty. The contrast between the EU's expansion through attraction versus traditional imperial expansion through coercion offers an instructive case study in modern power dynamics. Digital platforms like Google, Facebook, and Amazon have created their own forms of digital empires that transcend national boundaries. Their success similarly depends on balancing global standardization with local adaptation, incorporating diverse user bases without alienating them. Even in personal leadership contexts, the principle holds true. The most effective leaders in diverse organizations are those who incorporate different perspectives and talents rather than demanding uniform conformity, who build cohesive teams while respecting individual differences. The golden rule of incorporation teaches us that true power comes not from domination alone but from the ability to create systems where diverse elements can function as part of a greater whole without losing their distinctive characteristics. It reminds us that sustainable success requires adaptability, that learning from those we seek to lead is not weakness but wisdom. As the ancient empires discovered, sometimes too late, rigid systems that cannot adapt eventually break under pressure. Those that can incorporate and evolve may transform but often endure in new forms. The cultural legacy of Rome outlived its political structures. Persian administrative techniques survived multiple imperial collapses. Chinese innovations continued to spread long after the Tang dynasty fell. This historical insight offers a profound lesson for navigating our complex world. The most enduring form of power is not the ability to conquer or destroy, but the capacity to incorporate and adapt. In the long arc of history, it is not the most forceful empires but the most adaptive ones that leave the most significant legacies. The golden rule that every successful empire followed was not ultimately about domination but integration, creating systems where diverse peoples could see their own interests aligned with the greater whole. When empires forgot this principle, decline inevitably followed. When they embraced it, they created not just powerful states but enduring civilizations whose influences continue to shape our world today.